Do everything I say, or your mommy will lose her job, the fiancé warned the toddler. Then the billionaire found out. Nobody believed her. Until it was too late. A 3-year-old cannot lie. They don't know how. They don't know what's at stake. They don't understand power, or money, or fear. But they feel everything. Every threat. Every cold voice. Every moment an adult weaponizes their innocence. Something happened in that mansion. Something a grown woman said to a child who couldn't even tie her own shoes. A warning. Delivered in a whisper. Behind a closed door. Nobody was supposed to hear it. But somebody did. And when that somebody found out what was said, to a 3-year-old, everything changed. The engagement. The loyalty. The future. All of it. Gone in a single sentence. Whatever you think this story is about, you're wrong. You're not ready for what that little girl remembered. Welcome back, and if you're new here, you found this channel at exactly the right moment. Come closer. I need to tell you something I almost didn't share. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments. I read every single one. Stories like this one don't come along often. When they do, you don't scroll past them. Stay. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet, because what's coming next, you'll want to be here for all of it. Let's begin. The gates opened automatically. They always did for Damien Ashford. 31 years old. Self-made. The kind of wealthy that doesn't announce itself with gold watches. It announces itself with silence. With space. With a home so large that sounds disappeared before they reached the next room. Damien had built his empire in logistics and infrastructure. The unglamorous backbone of modern civilization. He didn't need people to find him interesting. He needed them to be reliable. He needed his world to function the way his contracts did. Clean, precise, without hidden clauses. His mansion sat on 4 acres outside the city. Stone walls the color of winter fog. Iron-framed windows that caught the morning light and turned it amber. Inside, the ceiling stretched 20 feet above marble floors, so polished you could see your own reflection walking beneath you. The house smelled of sandalwood and fresh linen. Always. 'Cause Rosa kept it that way. Rosa Mendez had worked in that house for 2 years. 34 years old, 5'3". With thick dark hair she kept pinned back while she worked and let loose only when she thought no one was watching. She moved through the mansion like someone who had learned to be invisible on purpose. Quiet footsteps, averted eyes, a presence that tidied and disappeared. She had come to this country with nothing but her daughter. Little Maya. 3 years old. Dark curls. Eyes like 2 drops of black ink on warm paper. Maya spent her days in the small staff quarters at the East Wing, a modest room with a narrow window that faced the garden. While her mother worked, Maya sat on a patchwork quilt and pressed her small palms against the cool glass, watching the butterflies find the roses. She didn't know she was poor. She didn't know her mother cried some nights with a pillow pressed to her face so the sound wouldn't travel. She only knew the garden. Quilt. Her mother's hands, which smelled like lavender soap and safety. Can you picture it? A child that small, alone in a wing of a billionaire's house, with no idea that someone in that same house had already decided she was a problem. Damien had noticed Rosa the way you notice something that works exactly as it should. Quietly. Without friction. She was not a person to him yet. She was part of the architecture of his daily life. His fiancée, Celeste Vane, had noticed Rosa differently. Celeste was 26. A former model turned lifestyle influencer, as she described herself with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She had met Damien at a charity gala 18 months ago and had spent every day since then positioning herself as indispensable to his world. She was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. Deliberately. Carefully. She wore clothes that cost more than Rosa earned in 3 months and carried a perfume so distinctive, white musk and black orchid, that every room she left still held her presence for an hour after she was gone. What was it about Rosa that unsettled Celeste so deeply? That question would take 7 chapters to fully answer. But it started on a Tuesday morning in March. Damien was in Geneva, a 4-day infrastructure summit. His calendar had been blocked for weeks. Celeste was alone in the mansion. Or nearly alone. She had forgotten about Maya. Most people did. The child was so quiet, so small, so easy to overlook. But Maya was in the hallway that morning, toddling toward the kitchen in her socked feet, dragging a stuffed rabbit by one frayed ear, when she heard Celeste's voice coming from behind the partly open door of the sunroom. The child stopped. She couldn't understand all the words. She was 3. But she understood the tone. It was the same tone the thunder used before the lightning came. She stood very still, the rabbit dangling at her side, and she listened. And what she heard, what lodged itself in her 3-year-old mind with the terrible permanence that only fear can achieve, would not surface until Damien came home. The mansion had no children's laughter in it. But from that morning forward it would carry something else. Secret. And secrets in a house that large have nowhere to go but inward, until they explode. The morning after Damien returned from Geneva, the house felt different. Not louder. Not warmer. Different in the way a room feels when someone has moved every piece of furniture 2 inches and you can't identify what's wrong, only that something is. Damien came through the front doors at 7:14 a.m. He had taken the red-eye, carrying nothing but a leather carry-on and the particular exhaustion of a man who had spent 4 days negotiating with people who all wanted something from him. He set his bag down in the foyer. The marble floor caught the sound of it. Rosa appeared at the hallway entrance 30 seconds later. Not because she had been waiting. She hadn't been told he was coming early. But because she had heard the door and her body had learned to respond to sounds in this house the way a musician learns to respond to a conductor. "Good morning, Mr. Ashford," she said. "I'll have coffee ready in 3 minutes." He looked at her for a moment longer than usual. "Thank you, Rosa." 2 words. Ordinary. But something in her expression flickered. Something quick and controlled, like a light switched off before anyone could confirm they'd seen it. And then her face returned to its professional stillness and she disappeared toward the kitchen. Damien stood in the foyer for a moment, coat still on, watching the empty hallway where she had been. Had she looked afraid? Or had he imagined it? Celeste descended the stairs at 8 a.m. precisely, dressed as though the house were a stage set and she the lead actress. Silk robe, hair loosely done, a coffee cup already in her hand that she had somehow acquired without passing through the kitchen. She kissed him on the cheek. Her perfume, that white musk and black orchid, wrapped around him. "You look exhausted," she said, which was her way of saying he looked old. "Geneva was long," he said. She smiled. That smile. Wide and practiced, the kind that showed all the right teeth. "Well, you're home now." He had never quite believed she meant it when she called this place home. She said it with the same ease she said everything, as if words were decorative objects to be arranged pleasingly rather than vessels of actual meaning. Do you ever get that feeling about someone? That the warmth in their voice is a costume, not a skin? Damien had suppressed that instinct for 18 months. He was about to remember why instincts exist. At breakfast, he noticed Maya for the first time in weeks. The child had been brought to the kitchen by Rosa, who was attempting to balance her daughter's morning routine with the preparation of Damien's meal. Maya sat on a small wooden step stool near the kitchen island, eating toast cut into triangles, her stuffed rabbit propped against the toaster. Damien watched her from his seat at the head of the dining table, visible through the kitchen archway. "She's gotten bigger," he said. Rosa looked up. "Yes. They grow fast." "How old is she now?" 3 last month. He nodded, sipped his coffee, watched the child press both palms flat on the countertop and push herself upright to reach a piece of toast that had migrated. There was something deeply uncomplicated about a child that age. Something that made you aware, by contrast, of how many complications surrounded you in adult life. Celeste, who had been scrolling her phone at the other end of the table, didn't look up. Not at him. Not at Maya. But her jaw tightened, barely visible, a millimeter maybe less. Damien didn't see it. But Rosa did. She saw it the way prey learns to see the stillness in a predator just before movement. She picked Maya up quietly, said something soft in her daughter's ear, and carried her back toward the east wing. Maya looked over her mother's shoulder as they left the kitchen. She looked directly at Celeste. And she said nothing. Because Maya, at 3 years old, had already learned something that most adults spend decades trying to unlearn. Some people you don't make eye contact with. Some people you simply wait to leave. What is it that a child sees in someone that an adult in love cannot? That question lived in the East Wing all morning, quiet as a bruise. By afternoon, it would begin to make itself known. Because Damien Ashford was about to have a conversation with a 3-year-old that would unravel 18 months of carefully constructed lies. He found her in the garden. This was the twist no one saw coming. Not Rosa, not Celeste, and least of all Damien himself. He had gone outside after lunch, needing air, needing that particular silence that only open space provides. The garden behind the mansion was Rosa's domain as much as anyone's. She maintained it with the same quiet diligence she applied to everything, and in the far corner near the rose bushes, he found Maya sitting cross-legged in the grass. She was talking to her rabbit. Fully, seriously, with the complete conviction of a child conducting important business. Damien stood for a moment at the garden's edge, watching. He did not announce himself. He wasn't sure why. Something about the moment felt fragile in a way he didn't want to disturb. Then Maya looked up. No alarm in her eyes. No instinct to hide. Just recognition. "Man," she said. Because Mr. Ashford was beyond her architecture of language. "Hi," Damien said. He walked slowly across the grass and lowered himself to sit on the stone bench nearby. Not crowding her, not looming. At her level, approximately. The way you approach a small animal you don't want to frighten. "Is that your rabbit?" he asked. Maya held it up for inspection. "Bunny. Good name." She considered him seriously. Then she went back to her conversation with the rabbit. Damien stayed. He didn't fully know why. The garden smelled of damp earth and early roses. A bird was working through a repetitive call somewhere in the cypress trees. The afternoon light fell at an angle that made everything look slightly more meaningful than it probably was. After a few minutes, Maya said something. Mon voice. Usual. The way children deliver devastating information, without the weight they don't yet know it carries. "Lady said Mama lose her job." Damien went still. "What lady?" he said. Very carefully. "The way you handle something that might break." Maya looked at him. "Pretty lady. With the smell. White musk. Black orchid." The breath left his lungs with a slowness that felt like something being dismantled. He kept his voice even. "Whoa. The tone you use when you need a child to keep talking." "What else did the pretty lady say?" Maya hugged her rabbit. "Do what she say," Maya said. "Or Mama go away." The garden was very quiet. The bird in the cypress trees had stopped. Damien sat on the stone bench in the afternoon light, and he understood, in a single sudden totalizing moment, that this was not the first time Celeste had spoken to this child. It was not an offhand cruelty. It was a campaign. But here is what reframed everything that came before. Every chapter you thought you understood. Damien had been receiving anonymous notes for 6 weeks. Small cards, slipped under his home office door. No signature. Each one describing minor irregularities in the household accounts. Small amounts. Rounding errors that could be coincidence. He had assumed, without ever stating the assumption clearly even to himself, that Rosa was stealing. He had been quietly building a case. He had been quietly preparing to let her go. Celeste had known this. Celeste had written the notes. She hadn't been reporting irregularities. She had been creating the conditions for Rosa's removal. And now she had moved to the secondary strategy. If the financial suspicion didn't work fast enough, she would use the child. She had approached Maya in the hallway and delivered her warning with the complete confidence of a woman who did not believe a 3-year-old's account would ever matter to a man like Damien Ashford. She had miscalculated one thing. Damien Ashford had grown up with nothing. He knew what it felt like to be 3 years old and afraid. He knew exactly what that child was telling him. Does the truth always come from the person you least expect? And what does it say about us, that we build entire systems of trust, and a toddler with a stuffed rabbit dismantles them in 40 seconds? Damien stood up from the stone bench. He smoothed his jacket. He looked at Maya one more time. "You're a good girl," he said quietly. She looked at him with those ink drop eyes. "Bunny too," she said. He almost smiled. Then he walked back toward the house, and every step felt like the closing of a door he had not known was open. He did not confront Celeste that evening. This was deliberate. Damien Ashford had not built a $100 million company by reacting to information in real time. He had built it by letting information settle, by turning it over in his hands like a stone and examining every face of it before deciding what it was. He needed to know how deep this went. That night, while Celeste sat in the living room with a glass of Sancerre and a streaming series she had seen twice before, Damien went to his home office and closed the door. He pulled out the 6 anonymous notes from the locked drawer where he had kept them. He laid them side by side on the desk under the lamp. Same paper. Cream-colored. The kind available in the mansion's own stationery supply in the library cabinet. He hadn't noticed that before. He noticed it now. Same pen pressure. He could see it in the indentation on the page. Someone pressing deliberately. Not naturally the way you write, but carefully, forming each letter with intention. Someone trying to look neutral. Someone who was anything but. He photographed each note. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up the household account records. The actual records, not the monthly summaries Celeste had started providing him 6 weeks ago, casually, over breakfast, in that helpful tone she deployed when she wanted something to appear organic. "I've been keeping an eye on the household finances," she had told him. "Just to take something off your plate." He had thanked her. He pulled up the originals now and cross-referenced them line by line. The irregularities Celeste had flagged in her notes. They didn't exist in the source documents. Not a single one. Every number was clean. Every entry accounted for. The discrepancies had been invented. He sat back in his chair. The desk lamp threw a hard circle of light on the notes. Beyond it the office was dark. He thought about Rosa. About the 2 years she had worked in this house. Not a single item missing. Not a single complaint from any vendor, any service, any maintenance contractor she had coordinated. He thought about the way she had looked at him that morning in the hallway, that flicker behind her eyes, and he understood now what it was. It was not guilt. It was the look of someone who has been frightened for a long time and has gotten very good at hiding it. He picked up his phone and called his head of security, a former intelligence officer named Barrett, who asked no unnecessary questions and kept no unnecessary records. "I need internal camera footage from the East Wing," Damien said. "Specifically the hallway and the staff quarters corridor. 4 days prior to my return from Geneva." "How far back?" "All of it. Since she moved in." "Was." "Understood," said Barrett. Damien ended the call. He sat for a long time in the dark beyond the lamp's circle. He thought about a 3-year-old in a hallway, dragging a rabbit, hearing a voice that used fear as a tool. What kind of person, he thought, threatens a child? Not out of rage. Not in a moment of lost control. But deliberately, strategically, as a contingency plan. What does that tell you about everything that came before it? The dinner they'd had last month with his board of directors. Celeste charming every person in the room, laughing at exactly the right moments, touching his arm at exactly the right moments. The weekend trip to the coast, where she had cried about her difficult childhood and he had held her and felt certain of her. The morning she had brought him coffee while he worked and said, with that wide, practiced smile, "I just want to take care of you." He had believed all of it, because he had been looking at the performance. He had not been looking at what was happening in the wings. By midnight, Barrett had sent him 4 clips. He watched them in the dark. His face as he watched did not change. But his hands, flat on the desk, pressed harder into the wood with each passing minute. He did not sleep that night. And when morning came, Damien Ashford was a different man than the one who had sat on a garden bench and listened to a toddler talk about her rabbit. He was ready. And Celeste, who slept beautifully, deeply, with the unconscious ease of a woman who believed herself untouchable, had no idea that the ground beneath her had already disappeared. The camera footage showed everything. Not once, not twice. 7 separate occasions over 6 weeks. Celeste approaching Maya in the hallway, the kitchen doorway, the garden entrance. Always when Rosa was in another part of the house. Always when Damien was traveling. The cameras were motion-activated and silent. Celeste had never thought to check for them, because Celeste had never believed she was the kind of person who needed to be watched. That was her first and most fatal miscalculation. The footage showed the same choreography each time. Celeste would crouch to Maya's level, performatively gentle, the way someone imitates warmth without understanding its source, and speak in a low voice. Maya would go very still. The rabbit would be gripped tighter. And then Celeste would stand, smooth her robe or her dress, and walk away. As if she had simply checked on the child. As if she were someone who cared. In the 5th clip, Damien could see Maya's face clearly. He had to pause the footage. He sat with it for a long moment. Because what he saw on that child's face was not confusion. It was not the normal bewilderment of a toddler encountering adult behavior they couldn't process. It was recognition. Maya had understood, in the deep pre-verbal way that children understand long before language gives them categories for things, that this woman wished her mother harm. And she had been carrying that knowledge alone. For 6 weeks. 3 years old. Damien closed the laptop. The breakfast table the next morning was set with the same precision Rosa always achieved. White linen, orange juice freshly pressed, fruit sliced in the particular way Damien preferred, coffee already at the exact temperature he drank it. Celeste appeared at 8. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and dark trousers. Her hair was done. Her perfume announced her from the hallway, as always. She sat across from him. She picked up her coffee. She smiled. "You look better," she said. "You needed sleep." He said nothing. He watched her. The smile stayed, but something shifted behind her eyes. A micro-adjustment. The tiniest recalibration of a person who has built their survival on reading rooms. "Is everything okay?" she said. "I've been thinking," Damien said, "about the household accounts." The smile didn't move. But her fingers, wrapped around the coffee cup, went white at the knuckle. "I've been comparing the notes you gave me against the source documents." Silence. "They don't match, Celeste." Her expression did something extraordinary then. It cycled, in less than 2 seconds, through 5 separate configurations. Surprise. Confusion. Concern. And finally, landing on the one she had always found most effective. Wounded innocence. "I don't understand what you mean," she said softly. "I was only trying to help." "I know," he said. "I know exactly what you were trying to do." She put her cup down. "Damien, I spoke with Maya." The wounded innocence dissolved. Not slowly. Not in stages. All at once. Like a mask that had been glued to a face and removed too quickly, taking the surface with it. What was underneath was not rage. Not panic. It was calculation. Even now. Even caught. The machinery behind her eyes was still running, still searching for the angle, the reframe, the version of this she could survive. "She's 3 years old," Celeste said. "She doesn't understand what she—" "I also reviewed the security footage." The machinery stopped. "Do you know what real exposure looks like? Not guilt. Not remorse. It looks like a person realizing, for the first time, that the story they have been telling cannot be told anymore. That the audience has left. That the stage is empty." Celeste sat very still in the morning light. Her perfume, white musk and black orchid, hung in the air between them. "You were going to have Rosa fired," Damien said. "And you used her 3-year-old daughter as leverage to keep her compliant while you built the case." "It wasn't. You whispered threats to a toddler, Celeste." The words landed in the room like stones dropped into still water. She said nothing. "A child who can't tie her own shoes," he said. "Who has a stuffed rabbit named Bunny. You looked her in the eyes and told her that if she didn't do what you said, her mother would lose her job and go away." Celeste's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the position I was in," she said finally. Her voice had changed entirely now. The warmth was gone. The practiced softness gone. What remained was something colder and more honest than anything he'd heard from her in 18 months. "She looks at you like you belong to her. Like you're her. She's my employee. She's in love with you." The accusation sat between them. Damien looked at her steadily. "Even if that were true," he said quietly, "your answer was to terrorize her child." Celeste had no response to this. 'Cause there was none. What do you do when the story you've been building collapses? Not because someone found a hole in the plot, but because they found the foundation it was built on and realized it was never real. She reached for her coffee cup again. Old reflex. Something to do with her hands. He stood up from the table. "I'll need you to be gone by this evening," he said. "My attorney will be in touch about the engagement." He walked away from the table. Celeste sat alone in the morning light, in the house that had never been hers, wearing perfume that had never quite masked what she was. And in the East Wing, Rosa was helping Maya pull on small rubber boots for a walk in the garden, not knowing that the ground had shifted, not knowing that the threat had just been removed, not knowing that the man she worked for had spent the night dismantling an architecture of cruelty, brick by brick, because a 3-year-old had told him the truth. What does it take for us to finally see the person standing right in front of us? And what do we lose in all the time we spend looking the other way? He knocked on the door of the East Wing at 10 a.m. This had never happened before. In 2 years of Rosa working in the mansion, Damien Ashford had never come to the East Wing. Staff came to him. That was the architecture of the relationship. Invisible, unspoken, maintained by mutual understanding of the way things were. Rosa opened the door. She was in her work clothes, gray trousers, white collared shirt, but her hair was down, the thick dark curtain of it falling past her shoulders. She had not yet pinned it back. It was still early. She looked at him with a complete absence of expression. Not blankness. Not fear. Something more complex. The face of a person who has been preparing for bad news for so long that its arrival registers as familiar rather than shocking. "Mr. Ashford," she said. "May I come in?" She stepped back. The room was small and warm. Maya was on the patchwork quilt in the corner with her blocks, building a tower that kept collapsing and being rebuilt with perfect toddler patience. The room smelled of coffee and something baked. Banana, he thought. Or perhaps plantain. Maid. Modest. Real. "Sit down, please," Rosa said. She did not answer. Something in her had shifted. He sat on the edge of a wooden chair near the small table. She remained standing. "I owe you an apology," he said. She said nothing. Waited. "For the past 6 weeks I received anonymous notes suggesting irregularities in the household accounts. I was building toward a decision about your employment." Rosa's expression did not change. "I know," she said. He looked at her. "You knew." I suspected. The questions you started asking about receipts. The way the third-party accounts were being reviewed. She looked at him with a steadiness that he found, suddenly, remarkable. I assumed it was only a matter of time. You didn't say anything. What would I have said? The question landed like something true. What could she have said? Someone is lying about me. The notes aren't real. I have no evidence, only my word. In a house belonging to a billionaire, against an accusation seemingly corroborated by financial records. What would her word have weighed? She had known this. She had stayed anyway. Because she had nowhere else to go that was safe for Maya. Because the job, even under threat, was still protection. Because some kinds of powerlessness require you to stand very still and wait for something outside yourself to change. The notes were fabricated by Celeste, he said. Something moved in Rosa's face. Not surprise. Confirmation. She came to Maya, Rosa said. I know. I saw the footage. Maya told me. Rosa looked at her daughter, who had stacked 3 blocks successfully and was regarding them with enormous satisfaction. She said the pretty lady with the smell told her to be good or I would go away. Her voice was even. Measured. I didn't know what to do with that. She's 3. I couldn't go to you. I had no proof. I couldn't leave. I had nowhere to go. So I just. She exhaled slowly. I waited. Damien looked at Maya, who had now added a 4th block and was vibrating with a delicious tension of impending collapse. She's remarkable, he said. Rosa's expression shifted into something unguarded. Not quite a smile, but its precursor. She's going to be better than both of us. He had no response to this that felt adequate. He said instead, I'm terminating my engagement to Celeste. Effective this morning. She'll be gone by tonight. Rosa nodded. I also want to formalize your employment contract. Full benefits. Guaranteed tenure. A compensation increase that reflects 2 years of work I have significantly undervalued. He paused. And I want to set up an education fund for Maya. She should have options when she's older that aren't determined by fear. Rosa stared at him. For the first time in 2 years, the professional stillness cracked. Not dramatically. Not in tears. Just a crack. A single visible fault line in the composure she had spent 2 years cementing into place, stone by stone, because composure was the only armor she had. You don't have to do that, she said. I know, he said. I want to. Maya's tower collapsed. 4 blocks cascading with a sound like a small percussion instrument. She let out a sound of pure delight. Not frustration, delight, because the collapse was part of the game, the best part of the game, and began gathering them to build again. Damien watched her. He thought about what it costs a child to carry fear in secret. What it costs them to go still when danger is near, to grip a rabbit harder, to look at a cold face and understand without words that something is wrong and that there is nothing they can do about it. He thought about what it costs a mother to stand very still and wait. Why did you stay, he asked, knowing what might be coming. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Because Maya loves the garden, she said finally. The simplicity of it, the complete, unadorned truth of it, hit him somewhere in the chest. He nodded. He stood. At the door he turned back. Rosa. She looked at him. I'm sorry it took a 3-year-old to tell me the truth I should have found myself. She held his gaze. You found it, she said. That's what matters. It was more grace than he deserved. He knew it. He walked back through the mansion, through the marble halls, past the rooms that smelled of sandalwood, past the dining table where the morning's conversation had dismantled a future he had been building toward. And he felt, for the first time in a long time, the specific discomfort of a man who has been looking in the wrong direction for too long and is only now turning to face what was always there. Is it too late when you finally see clearly? Or does the seeing matter, regardless of when it comes? The answer to that was still unwritten. It lived in the East Wing, stacking blocks. Here is what nobody knew. Not Rosa. Not Celeste. Not even Damien, until the night before he knocked on the East Wing door, when Barrett, his head of security, sent a final report along with the camera footage. The report was about Celeste. Her real name was Celeste Vane. That part was true. But the biography she had given Damien, the difficult childhood, the modest origins, the self-made woman who had worked her way from nothing to something, was almost entirely constructed. Barrett had been thorough. Celeste had grown up comfortably in a mid-sized city, the daughter of an accountant and a school administrator. She had never struggled financially. The stories of hardship she had told with such moving specificity, the winter without heating, the mother who worked double shifts, the scholarship she'd lost, were borrowed from other lives, assembled into a persona designed to resonate with a self-made man who had actually lived those things. She had known who Damien was before the charity gala. She had positioned herself to be in the room. She had studied him, his values, his blind spots, the particular kind of woman he had been drawn to in the past, women who seemed strong but vulnerable, competent but in need of anchoring. She had built herself into that shape. But here was the final truth. The one that changed the entire story. Celeste had not targeted Rosa out of jealousy alone. Rosa had recognized her. Not consciously, not immediately, but from somewhere, from the accumulated data of a life spent reading rooms and people, Rosa had recognized something in Celeste that did not add up. And she had, without quite knowing she was doing it, begun leaving small markers of this recognition in her behavior. A hesitation when Celeste spoke to her that lasted a half-second too long. A silence in response to certain questions that said more than words would have. An absence of the complete deference Celeste needed from the people around her to feel secure in her performance. Rosa had not been trying to expose her. Rosa had simply been honest. And honesty, to someone performing constantly, is the most threatening thing in the world. The campaign to have Rosa fired, the false notes, the financial fabrications, the threats to Maya, had not been launched primarily out of jealousy. It had been launched out of terror. Celeste was afraid that Rosa saw through her. And she was right. When Damien told Rosa this, when he sat with her in the small warm room a week later, after the dust had settled and Celeste was gone and the engagement ring had been returned through an attorney, Rosa was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I didn't know what I was seeing. I just knew something was wrong." "You didn't say anything." She looked at him steadily. "Would you have listened?" The question did not require an answer. They both already knew it. He had not been listening. He had been looking at the performance. He had been so certain that the story Celeste told about herself was true because it matched the story he wanted to believe, that people who claimed to have struggled were honest, that people who claimed to be vulnerable could be trusted with his own. He had been using her story as a mirror. And she had known this. And she had held the mirror exactly right. Until a 3-year-old walked into a hallway in her socked feet, dragging a rabbit named Bunny, and heard a voice that didn't know it was being witnessed. This is the final truth. Not that Celeste was calculating. Not that Rosa was innocent. Not that Damien was foolish. The final truth is this. The person with the least power in that house, the smallest, the youngest, the one everyone overlooked, was the only one in a position to see everything clearly. Because she had no performance to maintain. Because she had no investment in any version of events being true. Because she was 3 years old and she only knew one register. Real. Maya never understood what she had done. She went back to her blocks, her rabbit, her garden, her mother's hands that smelled of lavender soap. She would grow up in that house with a different foundation than the one she'd been born into. An education fund that would open doors her mother had never been able to reach. A garden she would eventually learn to tend herself. And somewhere in the architecture of her earliest memory, below language, below narrative, the knowledge that she had told the truth to a man who needed to hear it. She had not been believed because she was credible. She had been believed because Damien Ashford, finally, was listening. That is the whole story. And it was always about that. Some people spend years building a version of themselves so convincing that even they forget it's constructed. And sometimes it takes the most honest person in the room, someone with no language for deception, no vocabulary for strategy, no ability to lie even when lying would be safer, to cut through every layer of it. Maya didn't save her mother with courage. She didn't have a plan. She simply told the truth, the way children do, without knowing its weight. And it was enough. It is always enough. The real question, the one I want you to carry with you when you close this video, is this: who in your life has been trying to show you something true? And what story have you been too busy believing to hear them? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories like this deserve to be found. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the next story starts with a locked door and a child who remembers everything. Stay close.